I see you here in the Frankfurt Pavilion, this already iconic space for culture and debate. My name is John Steinmark. It has been my great honor to work together with such wonderful organizations as Penn Berlin and many others in assembling this cultural and political program that we will have the opportunity to listen to and engage with here in the next few days, which we have given the title Frankfurt Calling, Perspectives on Culture and Politics. Vienna Calling, Dear Eva, is a song we can maybe listen to on a dance floor later this week. But first, I would like to ask you to come to the stage, dear Eva Menasse, the wonderful author and co-chair of Penn Berlin.
Ja, guten Morgen, mein Name.
A very good morning. I'm Eva Menasse. I'm one of the two speakers or spokespeople of Penn Berlin who have curated this panel today. It's got a nice tradition. It's the third book fair in a row where one of our events opens the discursive part of the book fair. And for this, we'd like to thank Book Fair very much indeed, and also Jürgen Boos and John Steinmark. In early July, the Italian writer and former head of the Salone del Libro in Turin, Nicola La Gioia, said that he was wondering whether it would be better to come here and talk about delicate subjects or to stay away from this book fair. The end result you will see in the context of this first event, but also many other events which we, Penn Berlin, have organized together with Book Fair, Buchmesse, and the Italian Publishers Association, where we are going to talk about everything which is important to our colleagues in Italy, and things which are not completely covered by the official guest of honor program. So I'm very pleased to welcome the panel. Birgit Schönau will be the moderator, who's also a member, and I would like to welcome Francesca Melandri, Paolo Giordano, and Antonio Scurati. Just one last technical information. This talk will be held in Italian, and it is possible to have this translated into German or English.
We have headsets in the back where you can have a German or English translation. Thank you very much.
Das funktioniert, ja, genau. Ja, hallo, guten Tag, ich bin Birgit Schönau, die Moderatorin dieses Panels mit italienischen Schriftstellern.
With Italian writers entitled Roots in the Future, or Roots in the Present, rather, which is, of course, a take on the official motto, which is Roots in the Future. Because we're going to talk about the situation of writers in Italy, about what is going on in Italy and its cultural landscape, and how the situation, what the situation is like for the writers under the Meloni government. And for this, I would like to introduce Paolo Giordano. Paolo Giordano is a graduate physicist and scriptwriter. He has worked with Luca Guadagnino, for example, and as a author, he became known with his prize-winning debut, The Loneliness of Prime Numbers. Finally, Tasmania was published by Surkamp. This was the most read book in Italy in 2022. Last August, Paolo Giordano, who also writes for Corriere della Sera, he published a much watched cover about the emergency rescue people on the Mediterranean. I would like to also welcome Francesca Melandri, who is well known in Germany. She keeps writing about the recent history of Italy, talking about South Tyrol and also colonialism Everyone Apart from Me in the Second World War, or Cold Feet, which is a book which is published by Wagenbach and is very much praised by the literary critics. Francesca is a founding member of Penn Berlin. Then we have Antonio Scurati, who is professor for comparative literary science at the University of Milan, and internationally is known for his big novel project M about Mussolini, which was awarded the Premio Strega in Italy. La Repubblica, the big international Italian paper, called it the most important work about the memory of our country. And in October, the fourth volume will be published, M, the Book of the War, published by Klett Cotta. And we also would like to recommend an essay about fascism and populism. Unfortunately, we don't have Melania Mazzucco here, who had to cancel at short notice for family problems, and we are very sad about that. I will ask my questions in Italian, so then we have more space for discussion, but you all will get the simultaneous interpretation. So Roberto Sabbiani said in Repubblica that he is coming to Frankfurt, in order to resist the Italian government against the authority which emanates from this Italian government. So what is your stance here? Because you initially also said you were not coming. Now you're here. What do you think about that? Well, good morning to you, and welcome. Thank you very much. Before I answer, Birgit, let me say the following. This is the first chance we have as Penn Berlin to appear here as part of Penn Berlin. Of course, everyone's invited to the stand of Penn Berlin. You can also download the program where you can see what we're doing. I'm wholeheartedly grateful to Eva, Birgit, and Simone for organizing this event, for being so hospitable and supportive, because they've helped us a lot on this route. I think this has been a very stony route, which started, as many of you will know, by the fact that it didn't really look very good initially. This was frequently the case, that at the beginning there is a certain shock, and as you will all know, this is linked to the fact that Roberto Sabbiano was excluded from participating in the official delegation, Italian delegation. Italy being the guest of honor, and this exclusion happened in February, I think. So this really acted like a catalyst upon us Italian writers. So we put our heads together, and then we wrote an open letter to the director of the book fair, Jürgen Boos. And then there was a second phase, which was even more difficult, but it's very constructive. So we tried to set up a kind of counter program to what the Italian delegation had prepared. And as everyone knows, this was very hard. There were no resources for us. We only knew we wanted to go here, and Penn Berlin, we didn't know Penn Berlin would support us, as they did, finally. And so they give us a chance to speak here, which is a great privilege. It's also relevant politically and gives us hope. This is the good thing which has come out of this affair. So we are kind of renegades, and apart from the publishers and authors, we are also here. Authors write books and publish books, but they are also the main actors in a cultural context, and they appear on stage of cultural life, and they are at home there. And unfortunately, we are not going to meet many people because they are not supposed to appear here. But thanks to Penn Berlin, it is possible to have some of us appear here and speak here. I haven't been saying what I wanted to say, and all of a sudden my speaking time is over. So let me say, I think Roberto and others, also their families, have hesitated a long time, are we going to Frankfurt or not? Because we have a certain responsibility. It was uncertain, but I would like to stress one thing. The whole outcome of the Saviano affair, the Saviano and Book Fair affair, has been going on in Italy for 2 years. There have been many incidents, many things happening there. 2021, 22, we had a similar situation. It's about a climate where you were exposed to political power, and you felt that in the cultural on the cultural scene and also on TV. It was important that the publishers and also the booksellers hear about this. Francesca Melandri, Paolo Giordano just said that we are confronted with a number of things which go far further, and we don't know what the end result will be. Looking at it from the outside, the impression is that those people who resist in Italy or or speak up are treated as a political person and not as a literary person. So is there a mix up there? Are writers now regarded as political people? Is that the case? Well, first of all, let me also say a big thank you. Thank you very much to Penn Berlin for organizing this panel and other panels, and also thank you to Paolo, because without his energy, it wouldn't have been feasible that we have all these events which are coming up now. He's not saying this himself, but he's co-responsible for this. So I'm completely in agreement with what Paolo says, but let me also add something. I have to also mention other things which are part of the story. There are various considerations about the relationship between culture and politics in Italy. Unfortunately, our government has a certain deficit in certain respects, which are threatening. You actually could be afraid of it or be frightened by it, but it's not a new thing, especially not with respect to the media. The political authority is behaving in a certain way. I always try to explain this when I'm abroad. The political people in power behave in a way which suppresses the voices they don't want. Unfortunately, this is a very old story in Italy. This has always been around ever since there's been the Italian state. And it is one of the signs of a democracy which is not really mature, because it's not able to distinguish between the political power and the media power.
Well, the media should be the fourth power and controlling the others. But that has never happened. There's always been kind of a blend. Well, how can we explain this? A separation, a breakup. How can we explain this to our French and German friends? This is the case when we talk about Rai Television, for instance, the Italian broadcaster. There are voices who tell narratives, and if you take this into account and if you are critical to yourself, then you simply have to say that the political and cultural discourse is such that we don't like it when you hear the people who we don't want to listen to. They're always worse than all the others. This is a system that has been around for a long time. It's not an invention of yesterday. There's one more thing I'd like to underline. I also signed this letter, and this uproar that was created was fully justified. If you have an opinion about the books of a certain person, that's okay. But there are many well-known authors like Roberto Fabiano. Paolo and I spoke about this at great length. I kind of hesitated whether I should sign the letter for the following reason. I was in agreement with the content, but something was missing in my mind. And this activity of Italian intellectuals did not express this overarching view going beyond Italy's borders. And in Italy, it wasn't clear whether one should sign this or not over weeks and months, you know. I'm talking about journalists, mind you, not necessarily intellectuals. There were two great journalists of Rise, Montraini, Stefania, and these two were among the few journalists who accompanied the Russian invasion of Ukraine with their documentaries and with their news reports. And they also accompanied the Ukrainian army on their way to Russia, to Kursk. They did a lot. And these two names of these journalists were put on a list of 14 journalists, amongst them some French journalists, so 14 journalists who were threatened by being captured by Russia. Of course, you are threatened by death there. It's not clear whether you would survive such a foray, and they got personal protection, you know, they got bodyguards. And what I didn't see was, you know, a report about this kind of censorship that also exists in this world of so many wars. This has something to do with what happened to Roberto Fabiano in Italy. All of these phenomena are connected. And even if you work against this, you know, this is always part of the reality. Now, Antonio Scurati, we just heard there's not enough differentiation between politicians and artists. So you don't look beyond Italy's borders, and you don't look at what's happening abroad. Now let me come to the fact that apparently, allegedly, 60% of Italians never read a book. So very few books are read in Italy. Very few people read at all. Young people, of course, have to read either for high school or university. How come that this government is able to attack individual authors like Roberto Fabiano, for example, or you, for that matter? How is it possible that you are treated in a way as if literature only existed, which only seems to exist in a niche for minority, and on the other hand is mentioned so much in the newspapers, you know, that it plays such an important political role? Well, hello, everybody. I like to apologize. I didn't want to say this, but now I'm going to say this now after I've heard Francesca. I'd like to explain something. The Italians know all of this. I don't need to explain this to the Italians, but the German friends and the journalists all over the world, you know, I'd like to tell you what's happening in Italy. I don't agree with what Francesca said, that what's happening right now, that this has always been the case in Italy. Well, of course, there's always been a blend between journalism and politics. That's the case right now, but in the past decades, this was never the case, in my view. Let me put it in a nutshell. On the 25th of June, Italy celebrated the liberation from fascism. I was invited, and this is the national holiday. Right, it's a national holiday. I was at a RAI broadcast. I was invited. I was supposed to give a speech as a writer about the 25th of April, this national holiday. And I had submitted the speech, and when I arrived there at the broadcaster, you know, it's a state television. We pay with our taxes for RAI, but the director said, your appearance has been canceled. So I was not allowed to speak. In my speech, I had reminded people of the resistance to fascism, the victims of fascism, and that our constitution is based on this resistance. And the Prime Minister, on that very day, did not manage in her speeches to mention the word of resistance and to recognize what resistance against fascism in Italy consisted of. So the journalist who had invited me to that broadcast went on strike with other journalists. They went on strike for 5 days, and they striked against the way to which politicians were limiting their right to broadcast information. What happened then? The Prime Minister wanted to correct something on her Facebook account, but she wrote something that was not correct. Allegedly, you know, I had demanded too much money, so she tried to insult me personally. It was not about what I had written. And in the 2 weeks that followed, the national TV broadcasters and the newspapers, which are close to this extreme rightist government, they systematically criticized me or disparage me whenever possible. They describe me as a bad person, as somebody benefiting from others, but only for my own benefit, and so on. So 2 years earlier, during the elections, I had publicly voiced my opinion against the extreme rightist views that existed in Italy at the time. And the news media of the extreme right which published interviews given by the current Prime Minister. They published an article with my photograph, and they called me the man of M. I'm an author of the books entitled M. And in Italy, there's a saying, uomo di M. This means, in Italy, a shit face, you know. It was a play on words. And in these news media, it was described as if you should understand it as to mean shit face. And a few days later, somebody came up to me, and a letter containing a threat was given to me, and it wrote the word M, which also means merda, which means shit. And somebody sprayed this word on the walls of the house where I live. And my son told me, "Hey, Dad, look what's written here on the wall." And this really happened. And this happens with people who are critical of those in power. I wrote 3,000 pages about Mussolini. And a person like me is personally insulted and censored by the highest representatives of this government and representatives of our institutions. In the Corriere della Sera, the president of the Senate, which is the second position in the state, the second-ranking official of the state. He attacked me personally, and he himself is somebody who is only out for the money. So this is something we are seeing in Italy today, and this is the topic of why we are here today. And even today, this happens. Today, something is in the newspaper about me, so the newspapers, my lawyers should take a look at the newspapers, but unfortunately, it's not just my lawyers reading the newspaper, but millions of Italians, and they listen to the President of the Senate, they listen to the Prime Minister, they believe in what the newspaper says, and the newspapers are saying that somebody is a bad person, and the consequences of this are very harsh, and it can get difficult. I'm sorry, Antonio, to interrupt me. Thanks for the reply. No, I'm not done. I want to keep speaking. Sorry. Well, this is what's happening in Italy. Otherwise, we wouldn't be. And you have to know this. You have to understand why we are here. Thank you. That's the way it is. Well, this is how the right wing is working. They are attacking. They're in attack mode. They attack the moral integrity of people and the professional integrity of people, and they intervene against authors by saying, you are only out for the money. And they're doing this with Saviano and others too. At the same time, there's this kind of myth of cultural hegemony of the left, and we have to explain this to the audience. There's the former Minister of Culture, and when he was asked, why do you discriminate left-wing authors? And he said, it's not that we are discriminating them, they're discriminating against us. Paolo Giordano, is this a myth, the preponderance of the left in culture, or is there a grain of truth in this? Well, I don't believe I'm the most appropriate person to answer this question. I can only say after these 2 years, I'm beginning to realize what kind of a political view I have. When we talk about the effect that this government has on me and this kind of culture that this government pursues. Well, I wasn't really aware of my own position up until this time. Earlier, I was not really clear about the conflicting parts within me, but this government has simplified the battlefield in a way. And because of this, I got together with authors, also left-wing authors, and I'd like to comment, on behalf of myself, that after this government came to power, that measures were taken by the Ministry of Education that had an effect on the schools. They are responsible for the schools. For instance, this ministry was renamed into Ministry for Schools and Merit. This means that this is the ministry that does things in a right and proper way. I don't want to mention too many complicated details, but these things happen. And this means that they believe that they're doing everything just right. And I was in a position of a critical person, of a critic, even before. And the government, at a certain point, the government declared me an enemy officially.
So I was charged with having hegemony ideas, because this the left wing actually claimed the privilege of culture. But Antonio talked about his own situation, but this was, of course, an extreme case. It was an obvious case, really. of him being attacked because of the position he has, and this was laughable, the way it was done, the way he was attacked. So the pattern behind this, the behavior pattern which he described, also was applied to other writers, maybe on people who are less known, less well known. Christian Reimer or other friends, they had the same issues, problems, and well, it wasn't known for them. They were not as well known. He's also a teacher, and of course this is where we come full circle with the Ministry of Education, because he attacked the Minister for Education, and as a result he was lumped with a disciplinary procedure. And at this point there is something going wrong in terms of the relationship between writers and politics. The moment when you exercise your right to expression, but the answers you get from politicians is aggressive, so you are threatened with disciplinary proceedings, with being marginalized or being bullied. And when Antonio Sborati, well, if Antonio Sborati seems to have be broad-shouldered, and he still remains a citizen, an Italian citizen, and he, of course, can withstand the pressure, but it's not right. It is not just the way he's being treated. If these tools are used as a tool of threat, him, Francesca, and myself, we can build upon alliances. We have allies. We feel part of a group. But there are others who are in a similar situation, who are weaker than us, and they don't have these allies, and they maybe not, they don't criticize as much, but they are still treated the same way, and the freedom of expression is being penalized. This is something which is going on as we speak. It is really true. It is not just us being oversensitive or something. It is something which is used by the right-wing press organs to attack people in their private lives, and this is done systematically. Thank you, Paolo. Francesca, you just said that the fragmentation of RAI is nothing new. Even before Berlusconi, there was the same phenomenon. This was done by the left, by Berlusconi, and is now done by the right. Maybe it's never been as bad as today, and the political will seems to be that opposition should be silenced, both in television and radio, because there's still radio. So there is the freedom of the press is under threat, and what does it mean for Italian writers who are not as famous as you are? They, of course, drop below the radar. They don't have as much airtime as you have. They have no leeway anymore, room to maneuver. They cannot do anything. So what does it mean for them? Considering that even Germany wants to save money on cultural channels. But if they want to silence people, that's really a terrible situation. What do you say? Well, there are various debates at various levels. When it comes to space and room to maneuver, I have to say it didn't really start with the Meloni government, this restriction of the freedom of movement. In television, there was never a lot of space given to culture. This was the case even before Meloni. I have traveled the whole of Europe, and I've always envied my colleagues in other countries, such as the Netherlands and other countries where there was a culture fund, where it was where translations were subsidized, and so on. And I have to go back to the fact that whatever all I said is no contradiction to what Antonio said. I don't think there is a contradiction between us two. But what I'm missing in your statement, it's more like a proposal from my side. Under the aspect that everything you say is unacceptable, obviously, that an author such as Antonio is marginalized in this way, but I'm missing a piece, being self-critical. I think cultural production has to be diverse. In view of these developments, we're missing something which is universal. It's really missing the words there, but all these things are connected. So what Antonio is writing about and talking about, these terrible things, and what goes beyond that and what's still present in Italy. So we now have a center-right or right-wing government, but this seems to be a trend also in other Western democracies. And it's no coincidence the fact that Viktor Orban is a crony, a big friend of Giorgia Meloni, and he's also a friend of Putin, and Putin is a friend of Trump's, and so on and so forth. But we, who don't tolerate this, can't tolerate this really, we have to take our responsibility by helping the other countries and also ourselves overcoming these problems. We first of all have to understand the problems and then try and overcome them. That's how I see it. So this is not a specifically Italian problem. Of course, it is also to some extent specific to Italy, but it's not limited to Italy. It is the case in other places too. It's even worse there sometimes. It's an attack upon democracy. And this concerns all Western democracies, and that's why you have to watch out for what's going in other democracies, even war. Freedom of expression, freedom of the press are being suppressed, are being restricted. I mentioned the journalists Battistini and Dragini, who are being threatened by a country which is not Italy. In this case, it was actually Russia. The threat was emanating from Russia, but no one really called in the the Russian ambassador to Italy. I didn't do anything. No other voices were heard to protest against this. And so putting this into context, this is something I'm missing, and this is my invitation to all of you. Thank you, Francesca. I think you are right. On the one hand, in Italy, developments must be observed, but you also have to monitor developments in other countries, even including the US. But in Germany, for example, Italy has always been seen as a political partner, even at the present time, as we speak. It is true that they say it's like, well, if it's right-wing government in Italy at the moment, but there are also center parties who are involved in discussions about, for example, migration and others. This is important to continue on this idea. But against this background, I would like to come back to Antonio Scurati and the opinion about historic revisionism. This is something which unites all the right-wing forces across the world. The attempt to rewrite history. In Italy, the discussion is not very new, unfortunately. This has been going on for decades, but I'm no expert. So how is history being rewritten and what are the trends there? Maybe the Germans don't know that. There was neo-fascism in the 1970s, and what's going on about this? Thank you for the question. This is a very important subject. And this question enables me to pick up on Francesca's invitation and widen the perspective also on other European countries, rewriting history. Apart from the scientific criteria, which is based on facts which are verified and are universal truths in a civil society, replacing it by a memory which is one-sided, polemical, and always against someone, directed against someone. This is what's going on. And of course, there is also a history of partisans, but in the negative meaning. This is the policy of the new right-wing government in Italy. It's hard to express this. It is something which is going on behind the scenes. It's seemingly only a cultural issue, but it's really concerning everything. We can see it in Italy, in Germany, in France, but also in Spain, for example. You can see this trend. Why? Because it's part of an attack upon democracy. Not a direct attack, as 100 years ago, but it's part of democratic rules. It's using the framework of democratic rules, but everything is being eroded slowly but surely, progressively, not at one blow. There are always going to be elections. They will not be suspended. But every day there's some slight change, and you can't go back to the original state. I have to be very clear about that. I was treated as an enemy, like a dog, basically. So, dirty dog. And in my trilogy, which I wrote about M, I repeated the reports about Mussolini and fascism. This is my intellectual interest, and this puts me into conflict with the others because the others want to rehabilitate fascism and also of neo-fascism, not completely, but partially. This is part of their political program, and it's an attack upon liberal democracies. Well, Italy is just in the vanguard. It's just a pioneer. I would like to come back to neo-fascism. Sorry. Just a second. Let's look at the facts. On the 2nd of August in Italy, we remembered the bomb attack upon Bologna, which was in 1982, where a bomb was exploded in a second-class waiting room at the station, Bologna station. There were 80 dead, 200 injured. Nearly every one of us had already been born in 1980. There were lots of sentences, 5 lawsuits, and there were those guilty found. They were neo-fascists. Neo-fascist people who had killed dozens of people in cold blood. And the president of the Cultural Committee of the Parliament in Italy declared publicly that on that day, when the victims, the families commemorated the victims, They said judges had mystified history. This was caused by neo-fascists, quite clearly, but later on they wanted to rewrite history and they wanted to set up a slogan used by the extreme right, which says, none of us was in Bologna. You see?
Si faceva.
And it was the chairperson of the Commission of Culture of the House of Representatives. He got together with the extreme right, which had covered our country in blood. The Fratelli d'Italia, members of this party, were also involved. People tend to say that our Prime Minister is a moderate, but thank you, we only have 4 minutes. Please give me another moment. The Minister of Culture, who opened the Frankfurt Book Fair yesterday in my name on behalf of Italy, he was a member of Meridiano Zero. That was a kind of Nazi outfit in Italy 4 decades ago. He was a member. All of us lived a long life, and we all have gone in a direction that later proved wrong. But he never bid farewell to this period of his CV. Thank you, Antonio Scurati. Sorry for interrupting you again, but unfortunately we're coming to the end. We really have to come to the subject matter. What does the book fair mean to you? We're in Frankfurt after all. Paolo. I don't know, maybe you can see this. I feel regret in a way because this whole process is bringing us together much more. I mean, this I believe. And the way, we've come together, the way we're pursuing our goals. Francesca, I didn't really answer your question. Italy is a trailblazer compared to the rest of Europe. And this also goes for populism. We are the trailblazers. And as a matter of fact, for decades, there had been this kind of Berlusconi reign, Berlusconism, so to say. And maybe because of this, our writers really join hands much more than other places because of this experience. That's positive. But what I regret is, on the one hand, I don't really want to be at the book fair today because Italy is the guest of honor, or this could be an important opportunity, a unique opportunity, as it were, for Italy. The works that we wrote, that others wrote, who may be less in the foreground than we are, we could present these books to the audience and suggest them to the publishing houses. And this would be an opportunity, but we would have to take a modest approach and see culture for what it is and for what is a truly positive feature of culture. Culture should not be seen as something that you can bend and improve and change. I think a lot is being done wrong. I don't like the style. I don't like the way they're treating culture, and I feel sad about this. Well, the two of us, very briefly, yes, I also feel this sadness, like, regretting having come here almost. But now we are here, and now the first thing we do is we have to talk negatively about our government. That's a pity, everything that has been said about our government. Please don't take it, literally, if only they were fascist. But in addition to being fascist, they are incompetent. They don't really know how to work, and they're not very honest either. They pursue their own personal interests. That's obvious. But They have reached a very low level as a government. Unfortunately, I really have to say this. And this great opportunity to see Italy as a guest of honor in Frankfurt could be fantastic, but it's not the case. Antonio, another minute? Well, I don't feel like I talked badly about our government. I don't care about that. I'm in good company in order to represent Italy's culture. I'm a proud representative of Italy's culture, and I'm convinced that Italy's culture, and this goes for others too, of course, who are here. I'd like to invite everybody, and I'm convinced of this. I'd like to invite our friends from the other countries to look at Italy's culture, to get to know it, because we're highly motivated, especially before the background of this tension that we explained. We're highly motivated, and we are all fighting for democracy, all of us together. So there's this pavilion that was made by Italy. I think this is really ugly. It looks like a funeral institute, and this is not what it should be. This is not dignified enough, but it's about rooted in the future. And the facts on the ground negate that claim. The organizers are talking about roots, but the roots are fascist. This is our history, and the roots coming from fascism have not been truly cut. And I still call on people to cut the fascist roots. It's their roots. We have different roots. Roots that find their origin in the fight against fascism and Nazism. This has led to fantastic plants, not just plants like, trees and flowers, but cultural trees and flowers. And I invite you to get to know them. I'm proud as an Italian, because the same roots that you have, we don't have. Thank you, and all the best.
Sto fermo?